Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for attending the February luncheon put on by the St. Louis Metro section of the American Planning Association. We have a great turnout today and a great topic. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. A lot of you are members of the St. Louis Metro section, and we would like to ask you to sign up to serve on a state conference committee. We'll be hosting the state conference as we do every couple of years here in St. Louis this October. And Christy Volker is co-chairing the conference committee and could certainly use your help. So we're gonna put the Gmail address for the for our section in the chat. And if you would please volunteer a bit of time and sign up to make this a successful conference for us. We'll be hosting the other sections across the state and really looking forward to a great conference and being able to be back together in person this fall. So quickly, this is my first time kind of hosting the luncheon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jess Henry. I am currently serving as the president this year for the St. Louis Metro section. So to those of you that I do know, hello, and to those of you that I don't, nice to meet you. Our topic is the census today, and we have two great speakers. We have Craig Best, who is a staff member with the US Census, and we have Scott Hanson, who is with CMT and a longtime planner in the region. I'm sure many of you know Scott. So they have a lot of great information to share, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just as a courtesy, we'd ask you to stay muted. They will take questions at the end, but please stay muted during the presentations. And with that, I'll turn it over to you two, Craig and Scott.
Okay, sounds good. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this virtual luncheon today. And just a little bit about how this transpired. The Metro East planners on the Illinois side of the river, we meet pretty regularly, and one topic that came up was many were expressing their surprise at their census numbers when they came out last year. And so we started talking, and I said, well, it sounds like a good conversation to have with the larger St. Louis Metro area APA group. And then one thing led to another, and we were pleased to have SLACMA, St. Louis area city managers join us for our meetings here today as well. So welcome. If you're not familiar with our monthly luncheons, we have a different topic every month, and the census topic, as we can see from all the attendees, is a hot topic here in early 2020. So let me give you a little primer here about why your census numbers are important. And what the impacts might be because of perhaps unexpectedly low results. So first of all, why did that happen? And there's a lot of speculation about maybe what happened. Of course, COVID made unprecedented impacts on the nation as a whole, and it resulted in multiple disruptions to the 2020 census process. Among numerous problems, there was a challenge by the census to hire workers to conduct field checks. Normally, after the April date, by May, usually census workers are out going door to door and prompting individuals who had not responded to turn in their forms. And that was impacted, no doubt, by COVID impacts in 2020. In addition, for communities with a college or university or have students living in the community, the impacts in the spring of 2020 no doubt resulted in impacts on the population counts as students left their place of residence temporarily when campuses shifted to remote learning in April 2020. So I live in Edwardsville, Illinois, and Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville is located there. And I'm sure the surrounding communities such as Glen Carbon, Grant City, Alton, I'm sure they all felt varying levels of impacts due to students not being in the dorms. And of course, the count occurs on where you live on the date of the census. So if you do live in dorms, 9 months of the year and perhaps go home during the summer, the census count actually happens where you live on that particular day. The next is policy changes that were occurring even just weeks and months before the census data or date occurred, in terms of what information was going to be collected. And national news suggests that that may have impacted the results. So with that in mind, what happens, the question then is, what happens at the local level, or what are some of the impacts that could have happened at the local level as a result of potentially lower numbers? So the first one is, the community may not have reached a population threshold because of these lower numbers. So looking at both Missouri and Illinois, in Missouri, a community city type classification may have been impacted. So per the Missouri statutes, municipalities are classified on the basis of population, and there's a limitation on the forms of government's options that they have based on that classification. So population does not does not automatically mean that a city moves up from, say, a 4th class city to a 3rd class city. There actually has to be a vote. But if you don't reach the population threshold, the idea of even having a vote can't take place. So if you're right now, if your municipality is classified as a village and your population is less than 500, you can't move from a board of trustees form of government to, so for example, a 4th class city type of government where you need at least 500 people in your community. So the types of governments that may be selected in Missouri may be delayed for a number of years, either until 2030 or until a special census takes place. In Illinois communities do get quote unquote promoted to home rule once they reach 25,000 in population. So home rule, as many of you likely know, allows for communities to make local decisions on local issues, and a municipality with home rule status can exercise pretty much any power and perform any function unless it's specifically prohibited from doing so by Illinois state law. So in Illinois, home rule can be achieved in 2 ways. The municipality automatically achieves home rule status if it exceeds 25,000 people, residents. If the municipality population dips below 25,000, it continues to enjoy home rule for a period, but the clerk is required to certify the question of home rule, whether it should be retained for that community in the next general election. So slipping below 25,000 could mean that there may be a ballot issue that happens at the next general election. Also, communities with fewer than 25,000 residents, they can become home rule through a local referenda. But obviously the easiest way to get home rule automatically is just exceeding the 25,000 person threshold. And I can assure you that mayors and city managers and administrators look carefully at that, and they anticipate, oh, will we cross that 25,000 person threshold, or will we slip below it? It's a really important question about retaining those home rule powers. So currently there's 218 home rule communities in Illinois. All right, so then the next issue is the potential loss of formula-based tax revenues from items such as the locally shared gas tax, and also pass-through dollars based on formula on population for education and social services. So I was not able to find corresponding information for Missouri, but in Illinois, the Illinois Municipal League estimates that on a per capita basis during calendar year 2022, each individual in a community results in roughly $205.20 in state shared, locally shared revenues that come from the state. So again, using the gas tax, for example, the state sends a portion of the gas tax funds to the local government. And in all total, as you can see on this slide, each person is worth $205.20. So if your population has you short 100 people, and then you multiply that by 10 years, these impacts can add up pretty significantly. The next one is in regard to the wards, whether wards need to be redistricted. State law in both sides of the river require that there be relatively equal numbers of persons in each ward, and the boundaries need to be fairly drawn. And it also impacts the number of aldermen and wards at the local level. So again, using Missouri as the example, a village, if it's under 2,500 people, it needs 5 aldermen. But if the village is over 2,500 people, I'm sorry, I have a typo there, then you need 9 aldermen. Similar in 4th class cities, it's 2 aldermen per ward and 2 minimum, but the number of aldermen representing people in the city council or at the village board can change based on population. A similar issue happens in Illinois. Based on population, the number of aldermen increases and the number of wards increase based on population. And if you don't cross a particular threshold, then you don't increase the number of wards, or you may, if you lose population, you may have to reduce the number of wards, and there may be fewer aldermen. So that's a question for your city attorney to try to wrestle with. So those are just some of the impacts to think about in regard to population and how a perceived undercounting can impact local governments. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn this over to Craig, and he's going to talk with you about the US Census process and what you can do in order to address your population numbers.
Okay, give me.
Try to stop sharing.
Yeah, I think I can shut yours off from here.
Okay, all right.
There we go. Thank you, Scott, for the handoff there. As you've heard, my name is Craig Best. I'm a regional geographer with the Census Bureau. I've been doing this type of work with the Census Bureau for quite a while. I'll be looking at a 38-year anniversary coming up next month. So I've either been doing it for a long time or I'm just getting old, or both, I guess. I am from the Chicago regional office. However, I'm a home-based worker located in Kansas City, Missouri. So I was confused when Scott talked about across the river there, because we have different interpretations of what states are across the river on this side of the state. But regardless, let's jump into my presentation today. So I'm going to talk about 3 different topics throughout my presentation. The first being the Count Question Resolution Operation, or CQR. I'll talk about a upcoming operation called the Post-Census Group Quarters Review Operation. And third, I'll talk about the Special Census Program. So the CQR operation gives, in the state of Missouri, state and local governments the opportunity to request the Census Bureau review their boundaries and or the housing counts to identify any potential errors that may have occurred while processing the 2020 census count. This review helps to ensure that population and housing counts are allocated to the correct 2020 tabulation blocks in the 50 states, District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico.
Craig, sorry to interrupt, but your slides aren't advancing. I assume you're advancing through some slides.
You don't see a CQR overview?
Nope.
Wow, the slides aren't changing for you? I apologize for that. Let's try
No,
this.
still seeing the challenging year 2021 opening slide. Your first slide.
Okay. And you don't see a different screen there, huh?
Now you did just change, yes.
Okay,
Now you're on a
Sorry.
screen that says talking points. Yep.
sorry
All right.
about that. All right, this is where I was at. I apologize for that. I apologize for the oh well, I was going to hide that. Anyway, I apologize, a little bit smaller screen size, but the same information. Thanks for pointing that out, Scott. Any corrections, it's important to note at this point that any corrections that are made through the CQR operation will not impact the apportionment counts that were delivered to the president, will not affect the redistricting data that was provided to the states in August of last year, and it will not affect any of the other 2020 census data products. So data products that are online through the data.census.gov will not be changed as a result of the outcome of a CQR review. However, the information we provide, the updated counts, can be used in the Census Bureau's population estimates program and other future programs that use census data. And of course, the jurisdictions themselves will have a certified count, an updated count that they can use for their own funding purposes. One thing I want to point out here, though, is that I talked about state and local governments. This program is only open to the government itself. So if you are let's say a data user, you look at it and you think you found a problem, you cannot participate as a data user in the CQR operation. What you could do is go to the mayor or the county executive or whatever for that particular jurisdiction and say, hey, I found an error that we might be able to correct and change your count. And the mayor or that county executive will have to provide a letter authorizing you to be a spokesperson for that jurisdiction to challenge the count. So we're looking for it to really come from the highest elected official of each of the jurisdictions. So I'll talk about the different types of CQR cases. First being a boundary case. We can review the legal governmental unit boundaries. They're in effect as of January 1st of 2020, and the associated addresses affected by the boundaries. Now, January 1st, 2020 is an important date in the census process because boundary changes have to be in place by January 1st, 2020 in order to be considered or used for census tabulation purposes. So if there were annexations that occurred, but maybe they weren't finalized until, say, March of 2020, that was too late. It missed the January 1st deadline, so it's out of scope for the CQR operation. Similarly, the cutoff date or the target date, if you will, for the population is April 1st of 2020. So those are kind of the two dates we're talking about. So boundary cases, you would provide us with the legal documentation, whatever that means for your jurisdiction, that says, hey, these boundaries were in effect by January 1st of 2020. And you'll provide us with a list of addresses that were affected by that change. And the Census Bureau will do the review. And if the boundary was in effect by January 1st of 2020, we'll make the corrections and update the census count. I can tell you I've been in contact with a government this week that is probably a good example. The Census Bureau goes out every year and collects updated boundary information. But unfortunately, this jurisdiction hadn't provided us with their boundary updates for quite some time. So the census results did not reflect the changes that occurred actually about 10 years ago. And in fact, the mayor in I think it was January or February of 2020 was provided a map that the Census Bureau asked, is this the correct boundary for your jurisdiction? And the mayor said it was, said there were no changes. So now we're finding out, yeah, there were changes that should have been made. Doesn't matter at this point if they said no. The fact is the changes occurred prior to January 1st, 2020. We will still take those changes along with the list of addresses and we'll make the update for that jurisdiction. So that's what we call a boundary case in CQR. The second is a count case. We can review the geographic location or placement of housing units and associated population, as well as the census results to determine whether a processing error occurred that might have excluded valid housing units and the associated population. Now, a little bit later in my presentation, I have some slides with some graphics to illustrate some of these different cases, boundary cases, and count cases. So if that isn't clear, hopefully the graphic will help you provide clarification. Excuse me, clarification. Lastly, I just want to point out, federal law indicates or specifies that the census data collection in the field is over. It ended when the tabulation is reported to the President of the United States. Therefore, the Census Bureau does not go back out into the field and collect census information for review of your particular challenges. We'll review the information you provide us. We'll look at online records and make a determination. Okay, again, so who can participate in Missouri? Well, the state of Missouri can participate. Any of the 114 counties in Missouri can participate. Any of the active functioning townships and any of the incorporated places in the state can participate. So here is the Cqr schedule, and we've passed a couple of these dates already, but I'll clarify what they are about. In September 2020, the Census Bureau published the official 2020 census counts online at the data.census.gov website. In December of 2021, we notified the highest elected officials either by email or by snail mail, if you will, a paper letter, notify them about the CQR operation and their right to participate, and provided them links to information to find out more about the CQR operation. January 3rd of 2022, just a little over 40 some days ago, the Census Bureau began accepting cases. We began accepting submissions from eligible governments in Missouri, and of course, across the country as well. We have a deadline of June 30th, 2023. So the operation runs about a year and a half. And on June 30th of 2023, the Census Bureau will stop accepting cases and will provide results to affected governments by no later than September 30th of 2023. Now, the reality is our plan is to receive the cases, process them, and turn the results over in a shorter period of time than September 30th. Our goal is about a 90-day turnaround. But if you were to submit a case on June 30th of 2023, we're going to try to get it done by September 30th of 2023. And September 30th of 2023 is a deadline for the Census Bureau to provide results to the impacted governments. At the bottom is a link to the CQR website on the Census Bureau page. Provides more information on the operation, the participant guides, data products, and so forth. And you can also go there by entering www.census.gov and searching for 2020 count question resolution operation. If you have any questions on where that website's at, you're welcome to email me at the end of the slides. I'll give you my email address. So there are several different ways that you can participate in the CQR operation. The one method would be a paper block, paper map type operation. And these are really thinking it's going to be for some of the smaller governments with some pretty simple challenges. Since it's the case I mentioned with the small town that didn't provide us with the boundaries. They're a pretty small town, and I would expect them to submit information on a paper product. As the geographies get larger, maybe a little more complicated, the second and third options might be more viable for you. The second is the Geographic Update Partnership Software, or GUPS. It's a free customized geographic information system tool developed by the Census Bureau. It runs on the QGIS platform, if you're familiar with that GIS system. And it's a comprehensive system. You can view the maps, you can view the census counts for your areas, you can bring in your own address records, you can assign your numbers to a census block to result in a challenge to the Census Bureau. And that's functionality of the GUPS system. And lastly, users do have their own GIS software and capabilities, and they can provide the necessary products to us by developing their own systems. The address list that we require submitted to us must follow a specific format. So they can't make up their own. They have to follow that kind of a guideline. I can tell you nationally now, I think we have, I'm going to say like 12 to 15 different submissions so far nationally. And in most of the cases, I think it was all of them, they didn't provide the required information. So we're back working with those local governments to try to get that information from them. But I would encourage you to provide us with the address list for the addresses in the blocks that are being challenged. And that'll be able to get the best result for us. The Census Bureau will respond to all cases, even if the case is out of scope for CQR. So if you challenge the boundary that was effective March of 2020, the Census Bureau will respond back that that is out of scope because January 1st of 2020 was the deadline for boundaries. We will notify all affected GUs of any corrections to their official census counts resulting from the CQR decision. That small town with the boundary issue I described, they will be able to provide us with the boundaries, the correct maps, and that population will be assigned to that city. Now this population has been counted. Right now it's sitting in the county part of that particular county. It will be in the county, of course, once it moves inside the city. But both the city and the county might be affected by the count. So the county official will also receive a notification that this population change could occur. You can also have the same situation if you have cities that share a common boundary, and moving an address into the correct geography could mean moving it from one jurisdiction to the other. So if that occurs, both jurisdictions will be notified, even if only one of the jurisdictions are participating in CQR. The notification will be in the form of a determination letter, which may span beyond the CQR participant to the adjacent overlapping GUs, as I just mentioned. If corrections are made, we will issue new official 2020 census counts to the highest elected official or the highest appointed official of all the GUs affected, and the counts will be posted on an errata website on the Census Bureau CQR webpage. So you can actually go back to previous decades and see the results from the CQR operations on the census website. CQR didn't come about just because of COVID, just because of challenges we had this census. My first census was 1990. We did a CQR program after the 1990 census. So the program has been around for a little while. Now I'll show you some examples. And I understand, I realize the little squiggly things, microscopic squiggly things there are impossible to read. And that's fine for this illustration, because I'll explain what you're seeing. You don't need to read the exact numbers associated with it. So starting with the upper left corner, we have what we call a LQ count case. It's a living quarter count case. Think of it as a count case, the count case versus boundary case of CQR. And what we found here, the box on the left, you see more dots, if you will, inside of this red circle. And the scenario being that the jurisdiction notified us that some of these addresses, and they provided us with the addresses, did not exist in this particular census block. And we did the research and we found that those houses were actually across the street. 3 of them were. There's a total of 6 here. 3 should be on one side of the street, 3 on the other. So this is a geocoding type of correction. We make that correction and we will update the blocks for that jurisdiction. And and realize this is a correction that may not change the population of the city. If both sides of that street are in the city, this correction does not change the overall population counts. Okay, next in the upper right is a coverage, what we call a coverage situation. The jurisdiction notified us that there were some houses missing. We had some addresses as a result. And as a result of our review, we found those missing addresses, and those were assigned to this correct geography. And again, an updated record will be reflecting this particular correction and change. And if it affects the population count, there'll be a new population count entered. And the last example at the bottom indicates a boundary change. So hypothetically, the lighter area, the white area, is the town. And they said, hey, the boundary changed here and you missed it. It was in effect before January 1st of 2020. So the Census Bureau will move that boundary. And as you can see in this example, we picked up 3 new houses. So this kind of scenario, that area upper right in gray is outside of the city. So the correction moves those 3 houses inside the city, which would result in a correction that we provide to the city. Okay, hope that makes sense. And we always say the information shown on here is fabricated. There's no Title 13 information. I cannot show you actual house locations. That'd be against the law. So that's all I have on the CQR operation. If you have any questions, you can call the 2020 CQR operation help desk at 888-369-3617. You can also email us at that long email address. Staff is available by phone 8 a.m. through 8 p.m. Eastern time. I believe that's 5 days a week right now. And if they don't answer, you can leave a voicemail message and we get back within a couple business days. So you can direct those questions there. And my email address is also at the end. You're welcome to send questions to me and I'll refer those to the appropriate contacts. Next thing I'll talk about is post-census group quarters review. Now, when we talk about CQR, the only kinds of corrections we can make with CQR deals with the location of those units, not the population of those units, the location of those units. So if a prison, let's say, was located in the wrong jurisdiction, you go back to this example, and let's say one of these spots here, hope you can see that, the boundary case on the bottom left slide. If one of those 3 dots happened to be a prison that was coded as outside of the city, you can challenge that as part of CQR. You give us the name and address of the prison. We'll do the research and we'll make that boundary change. And the population count for the prison that we've assigned will be located inside of that city as a result. Now, if you question the population count of the prison, you cannot do that in a CQR operation. CQR is also not about challenging the population of the jurisdictions. So if you disagree with your population count, if you send a letter to the Census Bureau under CQR and say, we want to challenge our population count, that's out of scope. CQR is only about housing units and group quarters and making sure we have them in the right geography. Post-census group quarters review is an operation we're just kind of rolling out just a little bit, and it will be about giving you the opportunity to challenge the population count of group quarters. The Census Bureau released the notice of this operation through the Federal Register notice process. I believe it went out in December. It was open to comments through January 17th or 18th. And the goal is, beginning in the spring of 2022, we'll allow those same governments that could participate in CQR the opportunity to request a review of the population counts of group quarters. This is kind of a special operation that we're setting up. The concept is that you would give us a count of the people as of April 1st. April 1st is the date of those group quarters. The Census Bureau will conduct a review, and where we find it appropriate, we will update the population counts of group quarters. And that will feed into things like inter-census population estimates and the American Community Survey data as well. As I mentioned, it's open to the same governments as CQR. Identify the blocks in question and provide the requested records as of April 1st of 2020 for group quarters residents. Now, the exact details I don't have right now. I'm trying to be this intentionally vague. The program hasn't rolled out yet, and more details will be available at the time that's rolled out. And we'll notify the participants the same way we did through the CQR operation. We'll send out emails or letters to highest elected officials or highest appointed officials. So post-census group quarters review, there's going to be more to come later this year. Now, just well, planners, hopefully we know these terms, but I'm going to make sure we understand what group quarters are. They're places where people live or stay in a group living arrangement. It may include custodial or medical care, as well as other types of assistance. Residency is commonly restricted to those receiving services at that location. And residents of group quarters are usually they are usually unrelated. They can be related, but they're usually unrelated. A couple of examples here: federal prisons, local jails, juvenile facilities, nursing homes, homeless shelters, group homes, and so forth. There's a couple more examples: college dormitories, of course, religious group quarters, workers' dormitories, and so forth. So as I said, more on PCGQR, just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? More of that will be coming later this spring, hopefully, as the program becomes operationalized and information is available. And as I said, there'll be a similar notice to participants on that program. Last thing I'm going to talk about is Special Census. Now, the CQR and post-census group quarters review operations are programs offered by the Census Bureau, and there's no fee associated with that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have work on your end to do, but when you submit the information to us, we don't charge for it. We don't charge for the research time, and it's a free process for you at that point. Special Census is a different animal. So Special Census is a basic enumeration of population, housing units, group quarters, and transitory locations conducted by the Census Bureau at the request of the tribal state or local government. A little typo there. Special censuses are conducted on a cost reimbursable basis. So the entity that requests the special census will pay the cost for conducting that special census. It's typically requested by governments that have experienced significant population growth in their community. And in some cases, an increase in population that is established by the official statistics from the Census Bureau may result in increase in funding or other benefits. Now, you would need to check your state and local laws on that particular aspect of it, because state and local laws vary. Illinois is a state that has more special censuses than all the other states combined many times over, because their laws allow the locals, as I understand it, I'm not an expert in that realm, but they can conduct a special census every year or every other year. If they have that population growing, they can pay for it, they can get the special census, they can get the updated numbers, and they can move forward with that. Some states may not allow any of that. They may only base funding on the official census counts. Some states may allow that once in a 10-year cycle. That's something you would need to check with your own state to find out the specifics. The special census program gets kind of put on hiatus during the decennial census. It frees up our staff to do the work, also eliminates confusion. If we're knocking on your door for the special census or we're knocking on your door for the decennial census. The bottom line is we will resume the operation sometime next year, and the more details would be available at the time. I don't have ideas on the cost. Maybe Scott has a little idea what they spent there in Edwardsville, but when that time comes, you will send a request to the Census Bureau for a cost estimate. I think there's a fee associated to get a cost estimate. We provide a cost estimate to you, and if you agree, then the special census is on. That's all that I had for presentation today, and don't ignore the questions part. We'll take the questions later, but there's the email address that you can reach the geography staff in Chicago, and we take questions about just anything, and we're really good. If we don't know the answer, we'll make it up. No, not really. We'll forward it to the right people. We're good about that. So with that, Scott, I'm gonna turn it back to you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Craig. All right, picked my right screen here. Okay, so you know what, hopefully everybody can see this. What Craig talked about and what I'm going to talk about, it really dovetails together really nicely. So I'm going to talk about not just the CQR resolution effort that the city of Edwardsville undertook back in 2010. I'm also going to talk about the special census effort that the city of Edwardsville did as well. So let's start with the CQR process. And by the way, that PCGQR, hopefully I got that acronym right. That, my understanding from Craig talking about, that wasn't an option available in 2010. So the city of Edwardsville did not, you know, we didn't have that choice. So, so we followed the CQR process. So you can imagine me, you know, sitting in an office in late December of 2010, eagerly anticipating the release of US Census Bureau population counts for my municipality. And I didn't find out first. Of course, it was the mayor that found out first. And I got a call right as I was sitting down from the mayor, expressing consternation and surprise, to say the least, about Edwardsville's count, which officially came in at 24,293. And as I mentioned at the outset, that is just short of the Illinois home rule amount needed of 25,000, which the city had achieved through a special census in 2007. So needless to say, retaining that home rule authority was really important to Edwardsville. And the low count was a great surprise to Edwardsville officials for a couple of reasons. First, the 2007 special census suggested we were above 25,000. Of course, we didn't count all the census tracts and blocks for that, but we were reasonably confident that we were going to be above 25,000. Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, SIUE, is located within Edwardsville's geographic boundaries. That university had continued to experience growth in its on-campus student housing during the previous decade, from 2000 to 2010. In fact, 2 new dorms had been built actually after the 2007 special census. So we were pretty confident we were going to pick up at least 1,000 people because both those dorms had 500 people each, and demand was strong. And we thought that the other dorms on campus would, they were also full, and we didn't understand why our counts were so light. And then in addition, Edwardsville had grown, while Edwardsville had grown by nearly 50% in the 2000 census. We were not expecting a growth rate of that level in 2010, but a 13% increase was not in the cards. In fact, that was the slowest growth rate Edwardsville had experienced since 1980, the 1980 census 30 years prior. And then, despite the Great Recession that started in December of 2007, the city had issued permits during that decade for over 600 new single-family homes. And if you figure, 2.4 persons per house, that was a pretty solid number as well. So we were pretty confident that we were above 25,000. And of course, immediately Edwardsville's mayor instructed planning staff to do a census block check to look for discrepancies. So we looked at 2 census blocks on Southern Illinois University, SIUE's campus, and we of course right away noticed that they were significantly undercounted. And the undercount also occurred near downtown, which had 200 fewer people compared to the 2000 census. And as Craig had mentioned, that is actually the Madison County jail facility. And in the 2000 census, residents in the facility were lower than in 2010. And again, the count is taken where you live on April 1st. So even though it might be head scratching why you would count someone who is in a jail, usually for less than a year in a county jail, why wouldn't they just be counted, where they officially live rather than at the jail? But nevertheless, that's the policy that had been followed for years. But the jail population at Madison County was inexplicably not counted the way we had hoped. That actually was about 200 people. And every person counts, being roughly 700 people short of 25,000, we were really hoping to count everybody. So we made our appeal and documented our CQR application. We supplemented our information with a letter from the Director of University Housing for SIUE, who affirmed the total population in the 4 dorms was over 1,800. As of April 1st, 2010, we got a letter from the Madison County Sheriff's Department about the jail population. We included maps of the locations in questions, and we completed a spreadsheet called the City Style Address List Template for a CQR challenge to provide the information the census needed. So, moved through the necessary census requirements in order to submit our CQR appeal. And we concluded that our population, rather than being 24,293, should actually have been 25,301, so about 1,000 people more. Incidentally, Edwardsville was the 3rd city in the United States to submit a CQR appeal. So that should be on a Wikipedia page someplace. So anyway, so then in January 2012, we waited roughly a year for some results, and the response letter we received from the Decennial Management Division stated that no changes would be made to add the 1,008 people that the city staff had documented we thought should be counted part of the 2010 population total. Some changes were made to census block boundaries, but it did not, as Craig described earlier, it didn't really result in fact, it didn't result at all in any population changes. And the letter stated, it is possible that some people or housing units were missed in the census despite all our efforts. If these addresses are not found at all in the 2010 final census files, they cannot be considered for count correction. So again, I think that policy in 2010 is relatively similar to what Craig described during his part of the presentation. So as you can imagine, city was disappointed, not satisfied with that response. And we did reach out to our Washington, D.C. representatives and some others to see if there was anything that could be done. But unfortunately, the ship appeared to have sailed, and we were simply had to wait for an opportunity to conduct a special census. So, maybe during the questions section, Craig might be able to give some insight on the success rate of CQR counts. And it sounds like the census has taken some great steps to improve that, including the PCGQR process that they introduced for the 2020 census that will be rolling out soon. I think that's an important thing, and I'm really glad to hear that they're doing that. So anyway, moving then to our special census in 2014. Again, this is the experience strictly for Edwardsville, so results may vary. But we began our effort to conduct a special census in September of 2013, and it took roughly a year of planning, regular planning, not just internally, but with Census Bureau staff in Washington, D.C. and the Chicago Census Office as well. But if I can make a recommendation, as you sit down as staff, think about what your criteria are in regards to the census blocks that you want to count. And ours were pretty specific. We wanted to count areas that had significant growth through new home construction since 2010. Edwardsville had experienced, another, nice surge in housing growth. And so those were obvious targets for us to include. Areas believed to have been undercounted during the 2010 census. So needless to say, the SIUE dorms were, basically our poster child. That was the top priority to count. And then also areas that we noticed may have had high vacancy rates in the 2010 census, maybe as a result of the Great Recession and the home sales and people not living there. And now those homes, with the passing of the Great Recession, perhaps being able to go back and check those. And then finally, Edwardsville did experience a surge in new multifamily developments, specifically on student housing. Quite a bit of off-campus student housing was developed after 2010, and we wanted to count those census blocks as well. So, my advice is really think hard about where your best chances are of increasing your census block or your census population increase. And I'll explain more about that here on this next slide. So then we met with staff from the Census Bureau in the fall of 2013. And the US Census Bureau representative cautioned that if the target areas we counted or we planned to count as part of a special census resulted in a loss of population since the 2010 census, not only would the city have to pay for the expense of counting that census block, but we'd have to live with the reduction in population. And the city would not realize a financial gain as a result of those local pass-through revenues. So while we initially had 22 census blocks that we thought were potential places to count, we quickly realized that we needed to go for the low-hanging fruit and be very careful about which ones we picked, because we didn't want to take any risk of losing population in any census blocks. That would completely defeat the purpose. Another interesting rule of thumb, the Census Bureau staff suggested that if we had a 5 to 7% vacancy rate, whether in single family residential or multifamily residential, that's an acceptable average and a typical rate. But 8 to 10% vacancy rates within multifamily complexes also would be considered typical. But just be very careful in regard to that, because my understanding is that an 8 to 12% vacancy rate in multifamily complexes can be a little bit of a warning sign in terms of the vacancy rate, in terms of the housing industry generally. So it may be okay at the census level, but housing officials will be looking at a vacancy rate, if it's in the 12% range in multifamily residential, that's a potentially concerning level. So then following our meeting with the US Census Bureau, we reevaluated the areas for a possible count. And again, we cut the number of census blocks we wanted to count. As you can see on the map here, we had 22 areas that we initially thought about, and we cut those to 10. Also, really recommend that you go out and do a windshield survey of the census blocks that you'd like to count, and just try to get an idea about how many homes in the target area were occupied. If you see a lot of for sale signs and you don't think that those houses will be sold and occupied by the time the census occurs, you're going to have to live with a 0 for that property that might be for sale, when maybe you could have gotten 3 or 4 persons when the property is sold and a new family has moved in there. So I highly recommend doing a windshield survey. Also, city staff engaged quite a bit with property managers in the selected special census blocks with multifamily developments to request their vacancy rates. I mean, we kept our finger on the pulse on that, and we really tried to know about the ebb and flow of what was taking place. Edwardsville, again, has a large student population, and many of them live off campus. And we were constantly calling the property managers, asking them, what's your vacancy rate right now? What is it looking like in September of this year? Are you going to fill up all your rooms? What are all your units? What can we expect? And then, of course, an analysis of new housing units that were recently platted in the subdivisions. Not all communities are going to have that, but if you do have a new subdivision, look carefully at when the occupancy permits have been issued and when the houses get occupied. But again, we reduced our potential census blocks from 22 to 10. And another important thing is the date of the special census. So other cities in Illinois with colleges and universities had conducted a special census. We reached out to them, Illinois, Western Illinois University, Eastern Illinois University. We contacted U of I at Champaign-Urbana. All cities of, Edwardsville is about 25,000 population. So we tried to contact communities of similar sizes, especially those that we considered our peer cities in Illinois. So again, if you don't have a college or university in your city, but you have, say, for example, a hospital, a teaching hospital, that might be another way to try to get a feel for when's the best date to do a count. So, but following the advice from those communities, advice from the SIUE housing official in terms of when peak occupancy in the dorms was taking place and peak numbers of students in classes was occurring, and then recommendations from the census staff, we decided that early fall of 2014 was the best time to fully capitalize on a full city, basically in the census blocks that we were counting. And our best chance to count the student population in the city. Another interesting note is that SIUE officials advise that student populations tend to start strong in August and September, and then following midterms, people make decisions about whether they want to take classes at home instead, and they see just through natural processes, they see a decrease in total population come by October and November. And sometimes you also see a decrease at the completion, or actually regularly you see a decrease at the completion of the fall semester due to graduations in December. So do keep that in mind as well. So continuing on then, following approval from the City Council to proceed in winter of 2013, staff took steps as Craig described to complete our initial application with the Census Bureau. we made a commitment in terms of the census blocks that we wanted counted. The Census Bureau provided Edwardsville with an initial cost estimate to count those blocks. And then the City Council, another important milestone, the City Council had the budget for that spending for its fiscal year, which runs May 1st to April 30th. So just keep that in mind that you may have to, plan for conducting a special census. And I'll give you some cost numbers here on a slide here in just a moment. But the city of Edwardsville and the Census Bureau then entered into a formal agreement as to which census blocks would be counted and when it would begin. And then, as Craig mentioned, what type of logistical support the US Census staff would need to conduct the count. So Edwardsville was responsible for leasing an office, the office supplies, the desks, furniture. We organized a building lease. My notes said that we made sure that there was computer access. I don't think we actually made computers available. I can't remember, but and of course we wanted a good count from the census, so we didn't want to have them counting in a dank, former janitor's closet. We wanted to have them in good facilities so that they can do their best work. So another important consideration. So in 2014, then the agreement was signed and staff coordinated with the US Census Bureau to provide logistical support. We found a building for them to operate out of. And then we engaged in special census outreach to the census block residents. We sent postcards. We sent first-class mail to everybody in the census block. We sent emails if we could. We contacted neighborhood association presidents to say, hey, we're doing this special census. It's really, really important that we get a good count. And we provided updates to residents within the census blocks that, a count would be conducted, and that the people who are walking door to door collecting census information, they are legitimate people. They're not trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner. They're actually legitimate census officials who are conducting a count. So we wanted to make sure that the word was out that a special census was occurring in these census blocks. And we also, of course, had regular dialogue with Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, area landlords, property owners within the special census area. And we did that roughly 3 months. We started that 3 to 4 months prior to the fall special census when it took place. So then again, by mid-September, we ran an ad for census workers. That was handled by our HR department, Edwardsville's HR department. The city, here's those numbers that are really important. The city paid approximately $80,000 for its 2014 special census. We did experience a significant cost savings thanks to SIUE. They were able to provide information about the residents within the dorms. And maybe Craig could help me on this, but and when I get done, but there's 5 key pieces of information that the census collects. A name, I believe a date of birth, your gender identification, and I think there's 2 other points of data. But the SIUE, rather than having census officials walking up and down hallways in these dorms, they after getting an assurance, as always, from the census that everything collected was confidential, the SIUE allowed or provided information in regards to the counts in the dorms. So, I'm in my last couple of slides here, but we did, obviously we had a very successful special census count in Edwardsville. Here's our letter from the United States Department of Commerce, US Census Bureau, with our official numbers. And again, note that 4,061 number, that's just the count for those 10 census blocks, not for the whole city. And then here's a certificate from the Illinois Secretary of State with our official count results. And again, as Craig alluded to, Illinois is somewhat unique in that you can conduct special censuses regularly. And it's really important because of those revenue sharing, the way that revenue sharing is set up. Every person in your municipality has a dollar value in terms of those pass-through dollars. So in sum, Edwardsville's special census was definitely worth the effort. The 2014 per capita data available from the Illinois Municipal League said that each Edwardsville resident had a pass-through local tax sharing value of about $156 per person. Now that amount is, as I said at the outset, I think around $212. As a result of the increase in population from 24,293 to 26,631, we had an increase of over 2,300 people. If you multiply that by $156, that's over almost $400,000 just in 2015 in additional local tax sharing dollars that accrued to Edwardsville. And then you think about how you stack that in subsequent years. The Edwardsville is, my assumption is that they received similar amounts in 2016, 2017, 18, 19, 20. So a total of 6 years. And I looked at what Illinois Municipal League is saying on a per capita amount in 2020, and that was $187.62 or almost $450,000. So over the 6 years between 2015 and 2020, my back of napkin estimate for Edwardsville is that they received between $2.2 and $2.6 million in additional funds as a result of conducting that $80,000 2014 special census. So, of course, these funds are used for local roadway improvements, and they help fund essential services and programs in municipalities, including public safety, public health, basic infrastructure, construction and repair, critical dollars to a municipality, especially when they, when they accrue. So if you conduct a special census in 2023, you don't conduct another one, you can expect, 7 or 8 years, if you're in Illinois, 7 or 8 years of those amounts. I was not able to get similar information from Missouri. I think they're set up a little bit differently. But nevertheless, having a census count, as I described at the outset of the presentation, is vitally important for your municipality. So now is a great time to open it up for questions. We have roughly 20 minutes, and I think Jess is going to handle fielding those questions. My email address is available here. I'm no longer with the city of Edwardsville. I work for Crawford Murphy and Tilley. But I did want to do a special acknowledgement to the Edwardsville staff who helped with the special census and the CQR effort back in 2010, 2014. The public works staff included Tim Haar, Eric Williams, Cheryl Porter, and perhaps most importantly, if you have a GIS tech in your city and you're going to undergo a special census process, be sure to supply plenty of donuts. That's what we did for Brian. He was really the straw that stirred the drink and helping us make these really critical decisions. So that's about all I have. Be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Craig. That was really, really interesting, and we appreciate you being here with us today. So with that being said, let's open it up for questions. If participants would like, you can either put a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and take yourself off mute to ask your question out loud. So who's going to throw the first question out there?
While people think about their questions, I will just mention that this session is being recorded and will be posted to the section's YouTube channel, which I am about to post in the chat box.
All right, so we have a question in the chat for Craig. What is the biggest change that a CQR has found in your experience? Great question. Thanks, Hobie.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I can think of a specific example. I won't mention the town. It was actually not a Missouri town anyway, but they identified a group quarters that was not counted in their jurisdiction. It was a fairly small location. I'm going to guess it might have been about 1,000 people, roughly. But there were 1,000 people associated with this group quarters. And the group quarters had been counted in the census process, but it was geocoded just outside of that jurisdiction. They filed a CQR challenge. In fact, I think they were one of the first to submit a challenge, and it was an easy fix for us. We were able to put that in the correct geography, and it effectively, I think it was around doubling their population count as a result. So CQR is really about fixing those geocoding type issues, and that's what we were able to do for that jurisdiction.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Any other questions?
I got a question for Craig. This is Scott. Craig, I know that the American Community Surveys, they base their projections on population increases based on that April 1st count. And so in using Edwardsville as an example, even though our official number with the state of Illinois was increased by 2,300 people, the official information kept us at 24,293, or the count that occurred on April 1st, 2010. So for purposes of American Community Surveys and projections on all kinds of important issues, they still use that. They still use that first numbers, and is that correct, or do you anticipate that might be changing for the 2020 census?
No, I think that is the updated count is included in the ACS. I know it certainly will be for CQR and post-census group quarters review. It's a timing issue. It depends on when your special census is completed and when the next round of ACS data release occurs. But I'm pretty positive that we do that for the special census information. Again, I know we do that for group quarters review, and we'll do that for group quarters review and CQR.
Hey, Craig, I had a question about the post-census group quarters review. I want to make sure I understood correctly. It's the count of April 1st, 2020. So I think some of the concern is that like an SIUE, some of the students probably went home during COVID, right? So you wouldn't be able to challenge like that the population number should be different because students are actually there.
Well, that's what,
right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, do you understand what I'm at? I think you understand what I'm asking.
I think so. I think so. That's really what the post-census group quarters review program is all about. That's why we're trying to push this program through. We know that those students left, and we are concerned about those group quarters counts as a result. So we're offering this program. We know they left after April 1st. April 1st is the target date. Hopefully the schools will have records of who was there, how many were there April 1st, and we'll be able to submit that to us so that we can review and make corrections.
Okay, so the thought is that students didn't leave till after April 1st, but that was somehow missed in the original count?
Well, yeah, it'll be, it's kind of hard to say. Do they leave March 30th, April 1st, April 2nd, whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, we're best information available. We're going to say we're going to try to go with April 1st. That's the actual benchmark date for the census. Some of these things with the census like that get to be a little gray, if you will. For us, it's clear. April 1st is the cutoff date, but I was living this other place on March 31st. I wasn't living anywhere April 1st, but I moved into my house on April 2nd. We try to count them in the correct location is the bottom line, even though April 1st, they might have been in transition.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap up?
I see a question about slides. Like mine are available. If I can get a venue for providing that to you. I think Scott has it, but if that's a possibility. Mine are welcome to be shared. If you need a copy, I'll get a copy to your group so you can share that.
That'd be great. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, Craig, I'll forward those to Christy and to Jess, and we'll get those made available. So
Perfect.
some really good information that you have in there, because I can say, you know, working with in 2010 and 2014 on this, is that it can be a little intimidating for local officials to navigate the federal level of the census. But I will also say that even the DC staff were incredibly helpful. They gave really good advice, told us exactly what we needed to do. And I know sometimes census officials get a bad rap, but you guys, you know, all planners I think can relate to this too, is sometimes we get a bad rap too. But all of us can relate to the tough work that you do. And you have, at least for me, a lot of respect for the effort that you do at the Census Bureau.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for attending our luncheon today. We try to announce our lunches several weeks in advance and what the topic will be and how to register. So, you know, please keep following us. And again, thanks everyone for attending, and thank you. Special thanks to our speakers. Very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. And if you're lucky enough to have a 3-day weekend, enjoy it. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.